What's up guys, Dan here, Coalcracker. Windy day here in Pennsylvania, like super windy. It was wild last night, it's still wild today, lots of downed trees, so it got me thinking about wind, and that's today's video. It's gonna be all about wind and shelter setups. Now this is one of those topics that when I talk about it, people are like, yeah, but it like doesn't sink in, and I see it at classes all the time with people. When we think about the elements, we generally go to temperatures, so like cold or extreme hot, and then we think about precipitation, and then lastly, somebody might throw in their wind, okay? The weird part of that, when you really think about it, is wind is the least talked about weather condition, but it's the most experienced weather condition, okay? So we really should be thinking a lot more about wind when it comes to setting up our camp. So I'm gonna give you some tips around that and some things that you should be thinking about and doing when it comes to setting up your camp, preparing for, or be it already a windy condition. So the first thing is you just don't want to get your shelter set up right away. I know that sounds crazy because we always preach like, get your shelter out and use your shelter. And I'm not saying don't use your shelter. What I'm saying is when you get into camp, you don't have to throw your shelter up immediately. Give it some time, sit, take in the environment, maybe start working around camp, getting some firewood, feeling the environment, okay? What I mean by that is start assessing where the wind's coming from, if there's a lot of crosswinds, if the wind direction's changing dramatically. If that is the case, that all that's happening and the wind doesn't seem consistent to you in your camp, it might be time to change camp, okay? Because no matter how you set your shelter up, if you have crosswinds going this way and other winds blowing at your face and then stuff coming from behind you, you can't block that with a tarp style shelter, okay? So it might be time then to move our camp to another location. So hanging out and waiting and feeling the environment around you, that is like the #1 thing before you go and set up that shelter really quickly, just to get it set up because you think that that's what you should be doing, all right? Get it set up in a good location. Now, if you are in a location like that, the wind's all over the place, instead of battling that, because you're not gonna beat Mother Nature, you have to learn to adapt. Move to another location, and sometimes another location might be just behind a bunch of pine trees. It might be down over the hilltop that you're on. It might be closer or further from a rock outcrop. Something that's a natural windbreak is always gonna be super beneficial for you. Even if there's no wind at all, you can look around and say, hey, there's a bunch of pines, I feel the wind coming this way. If I get a little bit closer to them, they're naturally gonna block the wind. Then we throw our shelter system on top of it and we're really winning. All right, now the next thing that you're gonna focus on is setting your shelter up to take on all the wind. So what that means is that we're not accepting the wind into our shelter, rather the shelter system is blocking all of the wind from getting to us. That is very important. Now it seems like a common sense thing, but the thing about that is whenever you're setting your shelter up and you think that, there's a lot more behind that than just saying, well, I wanna stop some wind. Generally, when we think about wind, if the prevailing wind's like blowing in my face and I set my shelter up that it's here and it's blocking all the wind, when it rains, it's also gonna block rain because the rainstorms are gonna travel with those prevailing winds. And then if the rainstorm or the snow gets really bad and it starts to be more of a driving rain, that's also going to be pushed, again, towards my face. So this angle, it's not gonna be cutting back because the storm's coming this way. So thinking about wind is going to take care of not only blocking that cold air from hitting you all night and keeping you a little bit warmer, but even in summer months when you think maybe you want that wind, it's also going to stop precipitation from pounding down into your shelter and getting you wet, which can ruin your day just as quick as wind. And then lastly, setting up your shelter in other directions with the fire out in front also causes that smoke to just constantly blow inside your shelter. And if you ever experience that, it is definitely not a fun night. So that is not a good one either. And then lastly, which is sort of just like a benefit to setting your shelter up appropriately, is that once your shelter's set up and it's taken on all that wind and you're in a good area for camp, when you're gonna do work, okay, be it chop wood or carve something or work on some knots or do a project, being able to just sit in front of your shelter and have that shelter block that wind, and especially in cooler environments like today, okay, you're gonna be so much warmer by just doing that. If I would just stop the wind that's hitting me now, I definitely wouldn't be losing as much heat, warmer, more comfortable, definitely definitely a more enjoyable woods experience. So there's some things that you want to take into consideration when you're setting up your shelter system, no matter what it be. Specifically though, we're thinking more about these open style systems, which are going to be your tarp shelters, lean-tos, plow points, A-frames, all that kind of stuff. We want that shelter to take on that wind, and we want to find where that wind's at. So you do all that stuff, you're going to be golden. So that's all I have for you on this windy day today. It's an important thing to think about. Remember, wind at the top of the list, and then you will be good to go. So if you like this video, hit like and subscribe down below. You can also check us out at coalcrackerbushcraft.com for all our classes, our gear, and our merchandise. And then until the next video, stay out of the wind and stay in the woods.